The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Yesterday, I finished the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, and honestly, guys, this last book was the best of the bunch. I know that there are many out there who find the ending controversial. I know many who do not like the last book, that they think that, after Wolves of the Cal, the series is on a steep decline, right? But for me, I could not disagree more. I have adored this series over the last several months that I've been reading it. I started in February, it's now May. And I just have to say, like, this is one of the best out there. I would put this at my number 2 currently for favorite series I've ever read. I would put this above Malazan. I'd put this above Sun Eater. I would put this above A Song of Ice and Fire. I absolutely adored reading this. This is one of my favorite things ever. I love how original it is. I love how creative it is. I love the characters. I love the world building. I love the story. I love the atmosphere. I like how each book had its own flavor, and I enjoyed every single flavor. I liked how I enjoyed every single one of these books. Like, there was not a single book in here where I was just like, it was fine. It was just okay. Or, man, I kind of didn't want to read that one. If I had to reread this, I might skip that book. Not so with the Dark Tower. Every single one of these, I would love to reread. I would love to reread every single one of these books. I enjoyed all of them. And while I may not have enjoyed them all equally, I do think some are better than others. I think there's like one in here for everybody. Wizard and Glass is magnificent, The Gunslinger's magnificent, The Drawing of the Three is really fun and crazy, Song of Susanna is great, and of course, The Dark Tower is awesome. So, what this final book does is exactly what I expected it to. And I get why people find this ending controversial. I'm not going to talk about what happens, but I get why people think that way. But for me, I don't think that this story could have ended any other way. It is exactly what this series' main theme has been about. Like this story could realistically only end one way. And I think, people always get this idea in their heads, like, that fantasy can only ever be one thing, or a series can only ever end one way. A series, it has to end like Lord of the Rings, where it's, it's kind of like bitter but hopeful, or like Wheel of Time, where it's mostly good. Like you're saying goodbye to characters and you're sad about it, but it's a good, like, happy ending. But what I've realized after reading a lot of fantasy over the last 3 years is that fantasy is never just one thing. And while I understand where some people are coming from with their disappointment, me personally, this is just exactly what I expect from a series like this. This is exactly what I expect from Stephen King. He does not write endings that are happy. He writes endings that make sense. And, I know that's up for debate. He's an author who people don't necessarily always vibe with his endings. But for me, everything I've read from him so far, it just makes sense that this is how he would conclude this. It makes sense that this would be the way that the last tale is told. And man, what a way to end it. I mean, this last book has some of my favorite sequences of any fantasy in this entire series, or in fantasy in general. It opens up really strong. It has an amazing middle that I was really into, and it concludes wonderfully. I mean, this is a book that just, like, it ties it all together. It ties together the multiverse. It ties together the whole point of the Dark Tower and what seeking it actually means for Roland. It makes sense. It tells us exactly who Roland is as a character and what he has to do. And I think, like, what I really like about this is that you can interpret this ending in so many ways. I really like the fact that Stephen King does it's not open-ended. It's not open-ended, but you can kind of form your own opinion on as to why it ends the way it does. You know what I mean? And that is the kind of series ending that I've always enjoyed. It sort of reminded me of the ending of The Wheel of Time, where it's this idea of like, it all, the cycle doesn't end. The cycle does not end. Maybe it ends for now, but there will be another beginning at some point in the future. And I don't know, like that to me is always a more satisfying thing, where there's always more possibility for adventure. There's always another chance to get back in this world if the author wants to go there. Some people like it all wrapped up neatly together, but I am not one of those readers. I like authors who are ambitious enough to say, hey, I am going to stick to the theme, I am going to stick to the idea, and I'm going to stick to what I think this series is about. I don't have to wrap it all together to make my readers happy. I am just going to conclude it the way that I think it makes sense. And I think Stephen King does it wonderfully here. I have fallen in love with this series. I love the way it's told. I love the prose. I loved the narrators on Audible, or the audiobook narrators. They were wonderful. Highly recommend if you're going to check out this series, if you like audiobooks. And I love the way that it concluded. I think that The Dark Tower is just one of the best things I've ever read in my entire life. I adore the meshing of genres. I adore how much it connects to the rest of Stephen King's multiverse. I love these characters, and I'm sad to see them go. But Ka is a wheel, and eventually I will read it again, because the tower is always there. I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10, guys. Perfect ending to one of the best series I've ever read. That's it. It's awesome.